Okay, Lindsay, thanks so much for joining me today on the Football Focus chat.
Yes.
To start, obviously, we're going to get into the thoughts around and the feedback to Tommaso and the experiences that you've had with the kids in the Selec program. But I just wanted to get a little bit of context first, and if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about like how long they've been in the program, the journey with surf.
Yeah, so I have a daughter who's a 2012 and a daughter who's a 2014. So the older of the two, Addison, has been involved with Surf Select since Rhode Island Surf started participating in Surf Select. So this will be her third year participating. And then Delaney, a little bit younger, so she's participated for the past 2 years when she's been eligible to participate. So that's basically the duration of what they've participated in.
Yeah, part of your email to Tommaso was I just took this line out because I thought it was great. Surf Select can be intimidating and challenging in different ways. So let's kind of take that up with, first of all, on the field and as a coach yourself, and kind of knowing what is a challenging environment, what environment will provide different aspects of different skills. I mean, what did you see from, I suppose, a soccer context that jumped out to you about the program and the experiences?
So the reality is that soccer is no different, like passing, receiving, dribbling, all of that stuff is the same as it is in our Rhode Island surf practices at Surf Select. But the level, the psychological aspect or the mentality of trying out a different coach, different players from different areas of the country, it brings a different level of intensity to what they're participating in. So it kind of changes the ways in which they react. And I know as a coach, being from Rhode Island, it's very different than, say, growing up in Texas or California, where the player pool is much bigger. You're used to going to things that have a couple hundred players at it. You're used to having to vie for your position on the field or on a roster or something like that. But in Rhode Island, it's a very small player pool. So there tends to be a lot of comfort zone. And in order to advance your game, you have to get out of your comfort zone. And that's where Surf Select really has provided both of my daughters, but not just my daughters, other players from Rhode Island or other areas of the country within Surf Nation that are a different environment, smaller, with less exposure outside of that comfort zone, the opportunity to really develop those skills. I think the first time Addison went, it's very hard as a parent to watch your child not be comfortable and to struggle a little bit, but they do develop. I remember the first time she came off at the national training, after the first session, it was a bunch of tears, all tears. She didn't do her best. She didn't feel comfortable, all of that. But working through that and finding ways to rise above those feelings of nerve or worrying if you're not good enough and find a way to perform at your best. Now I watch her 3 years later, she has to take a penalty kick in a situation where it's either advance or be done. And she raises her hand, walks up to the line as if, nothing's ever happened. Something that I definitely would not have been able to do as a 12-year-old. So I think that dynamic of Surf Select has really prepared her for other aspects of the game.
Answered like a true coach there. What I was going to go is separate the soccer and the psychological, social. You're saying there, okay, well, what impact of the psychological and the social actually lends itself, improves the soccer as well, improves performance, improves confidence in those areas that sometimes you can say that as a coach. We're like, okay, we're going to get out of our comfort zone, but if the physical environment is the same, it's quite difficult to do that.
It's very difficult. And actually, I think they're very much tied together. You play your best when you feel your best, or when you can kind of overcome those things. If you're always experiencing doubts in your head or a player, or feeling like, if you make a mistake and you focus on that mistake, then you're bound to make more mistakes. And figuring out how to work through that psychological challenge as a younger player specifically, I think is really beneficial for long term. The other part of Surf Select is different players and different coaches from different areas. So in Rhode Island, we tend to build out of the back, play through the center, really develop. but that doesn't mean everyone does that, or they don't do it all the same. And every coach has a different thought process on that. So being able to adapt to that as a player, and still find success or find a rhythm of a game or a practice, and especially in a tryout, to be able to showcase yourself in a way that matches with the players around you and that coach is also another skill. Because my players in Rhode Island aren't always going to play for me. My daughters aren't always going to play for Coach Alexei. They're going to play for someone different, and being able to have that skill to adapt is definitely advantageous.
The piece there about, you said it's hard to watch your child be uncomfortable, and I've got an 8-year-old myself, and yeah, I completely agree with that. Sometimes he's only like doing basic soccer stuff at the minute. Talk about, like, because I think the temptation almost as a parent is to solve the problem that your kids have, which sometimes is to avoid those types of environments, situations. I mean, you've probably gone into that, I'm guessing, with the coach's head as well. I mean, this is going to be great. So when it happened and she came off the pitch, upset, what was your reaction, or how did you deal with that?
It's very hard because the parent and the coach in me kind of conflict sometimes. Obviously, as a parent, you want to comfort your child, but then there's also that part that's like, well, why the heck didn't you do your best? Like, it's just so easy. And it's very hard to sit there and watch on the sidelines, seeing like, she should be checking in here. That was a poor touch. She didn't see this. And all things that maybe Addison or Delaney are typically doing in their comfort zone. But then being able to use the coach side of myself and recognize that that's all because the dynamics of the situation are different. And it takes a little bit of time to adjust to that. So when I'm taking a deep breath and not having emotion with them, either being upset or being frustrated that they're not doing better than I think that, what they're capable of, to be able to talk through it with them. Okay, well, why did you feel that? Or why do you think you didn't do your best? What are the things you can control? And most often, that's what I fall back on, is what are the things that you can control? Okay, well, you can control how hard you work on and off the ball. You can control how much you communicate. I noticed specifically for both of my daughters, really, when they're communicating in the game, they're much more engaged and they actually perform a little bit better. So that's one of the things that we talk about them being able to do. Falling back on what their strengths are, like, what are your strengths? So go do that and just be good at that, and stop worrying about being something that you're not, or be the best version of yourself, working hard, having a good mentality, communicating, encouraging your teammates. And those things will usually shine through to a coach, regardless of what that coach is looking for as far as X's and O's.
Another thing you said there was about the different styles. And again, spoken like a true coach, I sometimes feel that we become quite binary in how there's a team that builds and they're going to play for a team that is direct. But in the reality that there's variances and there's degrees of build and there's ways to build. And we actually did a webinar, an episode with Johan recently, and very, very interesting to see, okay, a high level of rotation, high level of movement. Then you're saying, all right, well, someone might use that rotation higher up the pitch, or they might use more positional play, but the principles might be a little bit different. So I'm guessing that's also a big strength for players. Again, not to play a completely different type of game, but just to be exposed to different degrees around a type of game. Yes,
I think it's good for them. They also recognize what they like and what they don't like. I mean, if I think about my 12-year-old self playing soccer, or my 10-year-old self, Delaney's not even 10, she's 9, the way in which they can communicate the game or understand. Addison very much likes to play in a midfield that rotates. She doesn't like to play a static position. That doesn't mean that she can't do it. She just doesn't enjoy it. But she can also express that and have a relationship with a coach to express, like, I think this, or my vantage point from the field is this, which, again, developing those relational skills and the ability to understand the game IQ, to be able to discuss that with a coach and then defer to what the coach says, because ultimately they're they're pulling the strings. I think that's an exceptional skill that they develop, not just, I mean, through playing for surf in general, but also specifically to Surf Select.
I actually went to my second week at surf. I went to the tryouts in San Diego, so I kind of experienced it. And one of the things that jumped out to me, I thought another challenge for a player was the aspect of, okay, there is shape and there's when they're playing their positions, but the coach might not necessarily be putting them in their most natural position. Or you mentioned that rotation there. So what's your advice to your kids when they're saying, oh, well, Mom, he stuck me at right back or something like that?
Oh my gosh, the complaints about getting stuck at center back are real. The first part of me, the coach part of me, says center backs don't usually come off, so quit your whining. It's not all about scoring goals, but you also find at those events that a lot of clubs send, who's your most technical player, your striker, or your wingers. So sometimes it's being able to play within that. Addison played in Spain in November with the Surf Select team, and one of her Rhode Island Surf teammates, who traditionally plays on the wing, after the first couple practices and games, she said to me, I was on the trip, so she was more comfortable talking to me. She said, I really think that I would be better in the back, or I'd be willing to play in the back to get more minutes. I really want to be on the field. I want to help the team. And I said, okay, then let's talk to Coach Boris. And so we set up a meeting with Coach Boris, and she was able to express why she felt like that would be something that she would be able to do to help the team, but also help herself play more minutes and not be vying for those wing minutes. And I just simply stood there as an advocate for her to feel comfortable in that conversation. And ultimately, she started and played every minute at center back for the remainder of the tournament. It was an excellent thing to watch for her as a player to grow, and having more diverse skills are going to help a player always advance, especially in these types of scenarios. Being able to play more than, it's such a frustration as a coach when a player says, I play left wing. Well, what if somebody at left wing is better than you? You need to be able to play somewhere else. Delaney actually has been playing centrally for us in Rhode Island, but also plays on the wing. And she found herself on the wing in Dallas, a couple months ago, that email that I had sent Tommaso. And she was more successful as a wing in that situation. And it was good to see her not have really any mentality blocks about that. She just kind of shifted gears.
Even that interview or that meeting with Boris is quite interesting about, how you would approach that there, because I'm sure you've even experienced it yourself, where parents, with the right intention to come to try to facilitate, and sometimes, reach in and kind of lead the conversation. I mean, just before that meeting with Boris, how did you propose that to Delaney that this was going to go?
It was actually one of Addison's teammates, so it wasn't one of my daughters.
Oh, wow.
Right. So that was, I think as a parent, I was able to do that as a Rhode Island Surf coach that was there. I'm sure it would have as a parent, I don't know that I would go that route. I would probably more encourage the player to set up the meeting, maybe stand there. I'm okay as a coach if a parent wants to stand there and participate, just as I shouldn't say participate, support. But while the player works through how to express themselves in that way. But it wasn't actually my daughter. That particular meeting wasn't my daughter. So it was a little bit easier for me to say, hey, I'm just going to stand here so that she can express whatever she's wanting to discuss. And then, we went through what could she say ahead of time. We had like how would you express that? Not expressing it as something that's like me, or I want to play more, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I just think that's so fascinating, because that's part of the development pathway as well, especially as an elite level player is going to see regional coaches, national coaches, college coaches, maybe professional coaches, and, understanding how that you kind of maneuver or navigate around a conversation like that. That's a skill.
It is a skill. And it's all often like, standing there as a bystander, like, for her to be able to express that in a way and not mean, she was definitely very nervous, but to work through that, and I mean, I'm not her mom, but I am her coach, and I wanted to help her along that. But again, another situation of discomfort, right? Being out of the comfort zone and having to navigate that conversation with a coach that's unfamiliar, but in a situation where you only have, 7 days to practice and play and navigate that relationship. It's very unique, something that Surf Select brings.
Brilliant. I'm just trying to get my 8-year-old to order for himself in a restaurant, and Lindsay, it's like potty training again. It's so hard.
It is. It is very hard. But you know what? For myself, I always tell my players and my children, I remember being in college and calling my parents, being upset about, playing time or positioning or whatever it may be. And my mom would listen. And then she would say, but you're speaking to the wrong person. It sounds like you need to set up an appointment with your coach. And so I try to encourage players that play for me, my daughters, to advocate for themselves and learn to navigate that. Certainly ordering at a restaurant is part of that too.
I don't know about that. We're at the very, very bottom. Fantastic. All right, let's give Tommaso a little bit of glory here. So your email that you sent to him and obviously shared was basically about, how he reacted and built that rapport. But 2 words you used, which I'm sure you'll agree, which are quite a big challenge in coaching today, is ownership and trust. That you said that he developed he gave Delaney ownership. How did he do that?
So, I know that coaching Surf Select is so hard because you're bringing together players that have completely different skill sets, completely different times in their seasons across Surf Nation. And how do you get those players, those pieces to come together and compete successfully in a matter of days? So the first game is always a little bit, how can you navigate through it and find some success and then figure out what comes next. So for Delaney, that first game was okay, but I'm used to watching her be a leader on the field with a voice, having a little bit of command on the ball. And I'm not so sure I saw that part of Delaney in that game. But it was something in the second game that Tommaso recognized, with her shying away from the game a little bit. I mean, she was still playing well, but she was shying away from the game a little bit. And an individual conversation that he had, I think at a water break with her, I probably have a photo of it because I saw that he was having a conversation and snapped a photo, and she literally came back on the field and I think scored in a matter of 5 minutes. And that really built her confidence to be able to have that person that she could turn and look at on the sidelines. And he gave her specific feedback in a demanding way. It wasn't, he wasn't coddling her saying, it's going to be okay. He really said to her, it appeared, this is what I need you to do. And she responded. And that, that trust that he had to give her that responsibility or to that information to build her up a little bit definitely translated into her play significantly, in my opinion. And like I say, it's very hard coaching Surf Select and knowing what buttons to push with what kids. Some kids may not respond in the same way that Delaney did, but that was really what she needed. And I think that really helped her continue through the tournament in a much more successful way.
How did you mentioned the Spanish experience? How was the opposition? How did that shape the type of soccer that they were exposed to as well?
So that experience was crazy. And again, some of these experiences the kids have through Surf Select are really life experiences that I'm not quite, I'm sure there's something else that's comparable. You could go out and get it, but it's such a advantage to these players playing for Surf. And the opposing fans come with drums and flags. One of the teams with smoke bombs when they would score a goal, the blue and yellow smoke bombs would go off, and our kids, their heads were kind of spinning like, what's going on? But it does create a very soccer, football centric environment, you see the passion that these people have. I think we felt a little bit left out not having a song. We didn't have a chant. Everybody else had a chant. The teams were a balance. I mean, we played Barcelona, obviously very quick, very technical players. We played Valencia, that was much more physical, and strong and powerful. So it was, again, I mean, probably similar to teams that you would play in the US, where some are very quick and technical, some are more physical, powerful. But the passion and the environment with which it all happens is significantly different. And not in a, come across parent sidelines in the US, which are like negative. I don't know how else to say, shouting at the kids. You don't really hear that. I mean, unless maybe I didn't understand it because it was in another language, but it didn't feel that way. It all is encouraging, and actually all of the parents, from surf, regardless of where we came from or whatever, you kind of bond together. And I think by the last game, like, we had gone out and bought horns at some, thrift store or something to try to fit in.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've been on a texting a few of my coaching friends over the summer with especially the Copa America, and I just think that I've been more absorbed into that type of different culture, different type of football, pure, like some of the games, like the one last night was a little bit out of control at different stages. But you mentioned there the passion, and sometimes that makes us uncomfortable. Because sometimes that's physicality, which is, you mentioned Valencia there, which sometimes is, again, out of our control as spectators or coaches. But again, another really, really good experience for players to, maybe it's more transitional, maybe it's more physical. I don't know how you feel today about it. Do you think the game tactically is a little bit generic in the US in some areas?
I would say yes. I think, specifically, I think we still struggle in the final third. I think in the youth game, we struggle in the final third. And I don't know, I struggle as a coach, I struggle how to address that, right? Like, when I coached in high school, I had one specific play. Actually, I coached two players that were goal scorers. Like, they got on the ball in the final third, they were looking to score a goal. That's that. And that mentality is lacking in other players, and is that an innate ability or is that a developed ability? And that question, I don't have the answer for. I don't know if anybody has the answer for, but I think we do need to find a little bit better balance between making things so strategic and not necessarily predictable, but certainly less free flowing and kind of go score a goal. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the reality in the final third. And I struggle as a coach that we have a lot, good shots go in. So how do we get to a point where we have a little bit more of a mentality that we're supposed to score in the final third rather than we're supposed to get a shot off in the final third? It's very different.
It's so interesting, Lindsay. I completely agree. I think that something that we say, well, where is that goal scorer? And across the board, it's again, I look at culture over here in America, and I think we don't have a problem with that at quarterbacks. We don't have a problem with that point guards. We don't have shooting guards. So, and I wonder if training is a little bit, you mentioned there about the goals. You normally see session design these days heavy on the grids and the zones. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Do you think it's I hate asking this question, but is there too much, emphasis on possession, circulation? Yeah.
Yes and no. I think that there's also parts of the US culture that impact this because, for example, you're at a U7, U8 game and one kid is scoring 3, 4, 5, 6 goals. Somebody wants that person to come off the field Why? The name of the game is to score goals. Like, and so does that in turn impact the youth players' development such that they're looking to pass? We have both of my daughters probably pass first players. And that's something that's on their individual development plan right now, is identifying that opportunity to go forward themselves. And I don't know that I can speak for the two of them. I think that's part of who they are as people and as players. So that's just the nature of who they are. However, I do think that we discourage running up the score. You can't beat them by a lot of goals. Well, if you're that much better, like, what are you doing? You're taking your best players off the field. So are we holding some kids back in that way, or creating a mentality such that they don't think that's the right thing to do? And then, session design a little bit. I'm probably guilty of that. But the other part is that you start with, say you start with some technical stuff or some passing patterns, and then you move forward to playing and the finishing part. When do we do that? You design a full session around finishing, but is that enough? Do we need to do finishing or, even 5 minutes of 1v1s to goal every practice? Would that help? Probably.
Very interesting. Very interesting. My last time I'll reference my 8-year-old, but he did an intro soccer last year, little indoor, not very serious. And he's a little bit of a dribbler. God bless him. He's got dad's speed, so he can't get away, but he loves dropping the shoulder and carrying the ball. So I'm like, this is great, something a little bit different. And but then on the 5th week or 6th week, they started doing possession and passing. And then I watched them then starting to seeing, because he doesn't have a bank of information around pictures, so he starts to think pass when there's loads of space in front of him. And all of a sudden, as I'm sure then you tell an 8-year-old something, that's all they want to do. And it opened my eyes to think, like, maybe the traditional pass, the possess, like, because everyone now, as for a reason, is looking for that type of football, but maybe putting that football a little bit too early into the ecosystem might be detrimental.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I went to, easily 20 years ago, I took a U14 team to a women's Arsenal. It was a youth tournament in London, and the Arsenal team was beating everybody like 25-0. It was crazy. And I had a conversation with another coach while I was there, and asking, what in the US we would never, like, you would probably be fined if you beat a team 25-0. That's unheard of. And they said, it's just part of the culture. If you're 25-0 better, then you score 25 goals. And the other team walks away saying, geez, we have a lot to work on. That was here in the US, that would be unfair. They shouldn't have done that. One kid scored 10 goals. Why didn't they take him off? All of these things. And so that was one of the things that they said, was that it's a free for all, basically. And then the other was that they don't teach passing until about 10 years old. Now, I don't know if that's changed. Obviously, that was, like I say, about 20 years ago. But their thought process at the time was that kids at that age, 7, 8, 9, if you teach them one thing, that's what they do. So if you teach dribbling, they dribble. If you teach passing, all of a sudden there's passing. There's not that decision making. I do coach some of the younger players at Rhode Island Surf, and I do try to weave in the decision making aspect and highlight it. But I would say that that's accurate. It's whatever's been taught, whatever's on the mind is what happens. And then they are getting better about analyzing that and saying, geez, I had 15 yards of space. I didn't need to pass. But are we jumping the gun in the developmental process?
Someone said this to me a few weeks ago about, like, Xavi didn't look like Xavi when he was 6 years of age, and I thought, oh, yeah, that's pretty powerful, where probably was a dribbler, couldn't get the ball off his foot. And I think we try to almost reverse engineer what a pro player looks like now. But to go back to your point before, sometimes the sideline becomes the commentary. It actually probably influences coaches a little bit more as well, would you say?
Sideline meaning parents.
Sideline meaning, yeah, the noise in general.
Actually, well, I'm probably not the right one to ask about this because the players that play for me, the parents know I'm pretty strict on the coaching information comes from one sideline. So I might maybe have been known to send a message mid-game, stop saying kick it. But so I draw a hard line, so I'm probably not the right one to ask about that.
No, I definitely.
There's no instruction from the other side. Go surf, good job, keep working. Yeah. That's it.
Well, no, this actually is this. I need to speak to you then because this is how do you manage that? I'm going way off topic with Surf Select, but I think this is really important. So, you mentioned there you'd stop a game. Is that do you at the start of the year say, listen, this is how the sideline's going to act, and this is what I'm going to do? Or how do you manage all that?
Yeah, I mean, our club is pretty good. It's in our handbook, so I can reference like this is what you signed at the beginning of the season. But just kind of laying the ground rules from the get-go that it's very hard for players to understand. Mom's saying dribble and Coach Lindsay saying play the ball back and recycle. It's very hard, but it's also going back to being a parent and not wanting to see your kid struggle. When you see your kid not be able to make a decision on the ball, you want to tell them what to do because it's very easy from a bird's eye view to make a decision versus being on the ball, having pressure, varying things that you're dealing with within the game, and then to make a decision and maybe you make the wrong decision. And then how do you react? But the game is really a bunch of good and bad decisions and solutions, problems and solutions strung together. So getting the kids and the parents to understand that you're going to watch your kids struggle. They're not going to know the answer. They're going to make mistakes, but that's the way in which they learn. If they don't make mistakes, if I could put an earbud in their ear, like going back to quarterbacks, I mean, they've got an earbud in their ear. They've got somebody giving them the answer. So it's a little bit easier to be successful, right? So if I could put an earbud into my central midfield player's ear and pull the strings from the sidelines, we'd probably be a lot more successful. But the reality is, at no point in their career will that be the case. So we're doing them no favors by giving them the solution every single time from the get-go. The reality is that the coaching gets done in practice. And then, am I guilty of giving information in a game? Absolutely. I will give information and try to help players through scenarios, but at some point they have to come up with those solutions on their own, and they need to be uncomfortable such that they fall back on whatever they've seen or learned in practice. And the only way that's going to happen is if they're allowed to do that. And I mean, to bring it back to Surf Select, listen, sitting there as a parent myself, watching my kid and being like, oh my gosh, move the ball faster, check into that space, do this, do that. It's very hard to not say something. I recognize that as a parent. It's very, very hard. But having that respect for the process, right? This is why we sign our kids up and pay the money, because that development environment in practice and that process through Surf Select, the skills that they learn, whether they're successful from the get-go or not, will build them into a better player. And it does cycle back. I have watched both Addison and Delaney find success outside of their comfort zone. Addison, to the extent that, at national camp, she was much more of a leader this year, naturally feeling very little nerve. But that wasn't the case the first year. So maybe for me, it's a little bit easier because I've seen the other side of it. But that's kind of what I try to explain to parents.
Brilliant. All right, last one for you on the parent kind of advice topic. The parent that is going into this here without kind of a clear picture of everything you've described, and that suddenly it's like, wow, this is kind of intense and something that I wasn't really expecting. What would your advice be for a parent let's do two things. One, who's thinking about the program, and then the second one is like who's in the program and is maybe struggling with it.
So it's good you asked one that's thinking about to get into the program, because that was one thing I was thinking that I didn't really touch on, is that there's a strong focus on making the team, right? So I'm only going to participate if I can make the team. And that's really a counterproductive way to look at it, because regardless, so the process starts by being identified in your club and then going to the regional camp, right? So there are kids that I as a coach may nominate that I think might make a regional team or might make, a national camp nomination or something like that. But the reality is getting outside of their comfort zone and playing with those players in the regional camp is more beneficial than probably anything else within the program. Once you make the regional team and you go to the event, yes, it's great, it's fun, it's like the gravy of it. But that tryout process is what we would struggle to be able to provide a player from Rhode Island. Playing in and amongst those other players, navigating it, meeting new friends. I mean, the social aspect is amazing, because then, you play against somebody from New England Surf at tryouts, you make a new friend, and then 2 Saturdays later, you're playing against them in a league game. So that aspect is great for the kids. I think it's good for them to have contacts other places. I think it's good for them to be outside of their comfort zone, other players, other coaches, all of that. So I would highly encourage anybody to go to a regional camp for sure. After the regional camp, participation in the regional event, going to national camp. One of the things I see a lot is that a regional team is, say a regional team for 9v9 is 12 players, 13 players, right? So this past year, the age group that I worked with, I selected that regional team, but then I think I nominated 17, 18 players to go to national camp. So then the next question is, well, why would I go to national camp if I can't even make the regional team? Well, because of the experience. That's what I would say, number one, as a parent and as a player. I mean, and as a coach, because of the experience. However, at the national level, they select 2 teams, right? So maybe you were the 3rd best center back or 4th best center back in the region. But maybe when you stack up nationally, you're still the 3rd or 4th best center back. So then you still make a team at national camp. So there's still a significant opportunity. The other part is there's another coach nominating, right? Or selecting that team. They might think differently about you. It's great to solicit different opinions. Somebody might like technical games. Somebody might like the possession style game. So there's another avenue and different appreciation for different players and skills. And then there is nothing like being outside of the comfort zone and experiencing the fear, the worry, and then, but also finding some level of success that you walk away with that little bit more confidence. Like as coaches, we tell players, they need to get confident. Well, you can't go to the store and buy confidence. You have to be exposed to different environments and different levels of intensity, success, and failure in order to find that confidence such that you can then perform and be able to find success regardless of the conditions around you. So, I mean, for me, it's a no-brainer, especially being from Rhode Island. I mean, small pond, Surf Nation and Surf Select provides my kids the ability to continue to play in Rhode Island, but also have exposure to all of those other things that they don't necessarily get from it's just the nature of the beast living in the smallest state in the country, but that some of these other players experience more regularly. That was the first question. What was this? Oh, once you're in the program?
Yeah, someone who's maybe not expecting and kind of gets, oh, wow, this is different.
It is different. So it's, even though I know what to expect, even though I know game 1 is going to be not the pretty soccer that we're used to watching, and you think, but we just brought all these good players together. Why isn't it perfect? And it's just not perfect because all of the other things, they're outside of their comfort zone. I mean, gosh, they're 9, 10, 11, 12, even 14, 15. Like those opportunities didn't exist when I was a player. So there's no real comparison, but to be able to watch them, struggle through that growing pain, and the coach kind of figuring out, okay, maybe I thought the pieces were going to fit together this way, but maybe this fit is going to be better. Maybe this formation will, suit us better. Maybe we have to play direct because of the teams that we're playing against. And we're going to be more organized defensively, whatever it is. Having like a deep breath, a moment to just say, like, this is part of the process. I certainly, with Delaney in Dallas, still struggled that first game. I'm like, this is terrible. But it's not terrible, because as game 2 and game 3 comes on, it's nice. It's enjoyable to see the fact that they are good players with strong IQs and good technical ability, be able to overcome some of that like unfamiliarity and come together and have success. I mean, the team Delaney was on made it to the semifinals and lost in a shootout, which was, unfortunate circumstances. But if you had told any parent after game 1 that would be the result for them, I don't know that anybody would have told you that was going to happen. But it's all part of the process, I think. Trying to take a deep breath and a step back, and remembering also that they're 9, or even 14. Like, my daughter's reading Carly Lloyd's book, and she talks about being cut a couple times, being cut. And I mean, look at her career. So, and nobody's talking about her being cut when she was 20, or she was cut from the national pool, I think, when she was 20 or 21. And she was cut from some youth team earlier than that. I'm sure that coach might be kicking themselves, but yeah. I think keeping it in perspective, and also recognizing what Surf Select is for, right? So Surf Select isn't necessarily for winning the next World Cup. Surf Select is for developing that next level of skill, and I mean, both skill and mentality. I think the psychological piece is huge, what Surf Select provides.
Brilliant. Outstanding. Lindsay, thank you so much. This was amazing.
You're welcome. Thank you. And thank you to Tommaso for giving him another moment of glory for having the program and continuing through. It grows every year. So they did as low as U9 this year, and some of my 2015 players participated. And it's interesting to watch them navigate the situation, but knowing what skills they grow on the other side, they come back to Rhode Island being such different kids. It's great.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, he's outstanding. Only bad news is for you, Lindsay, that you did such a good job on this. I'm going to get you on again to talk about these other topics. So this was great. I loved it. Thank you.
Thank you.